Okay. It's my pleasure to welcome education consultant and teacher, Marg Meijers, who delivers online extension courses in coding for students in years 4 to 10 in schools across Tasmania for the Department of Education. She also teaches after-school coding to primary students as part of a transition to high school program. As a semi-retired teacher who's taught in secondary classrooms for 17 years, has been curriculum coordinator for ICT at each of the schools where she has taught. So please welcome Marg Meijers.
Thanks very much, and thanks to you people for sitting it out for this length of time. I'm really impressed. So a little bit about me for a start. I actually did my computer science degree way back in the dark ages, and then I took a fair bit of time off to have 4 kids and do a few other things. And then I went back to teaching later on. And I've taught ICT basically in high schools for 17 years. Most of that I've been head of departments in the various schools I've been in. I've had a fair bit of recognition for my use of games in learning. That's sort of my special area, I guess. I'm now retired from full-time teaching, and I'm living the dream that lots of teachers have. Mostly the work I do is from home. I teach gifted online courses to primary kids from schools right across Tasmania, so I've got about probably 40 different schools that I teach kids at, and I'll go into that a little bit more. I also teach after-school transition classes, which are a teacher's dream. So what they are is the kids from the feeder primary schools, they sign up because they want to come along, and they come along to learn stuff that they're going to enjoy learning. And so you have classes of kids who are just wanting to learn more, they're really excited about what they're learning, and it's really what, when you went into teaching, you thought maybe it was going to be before you got into the real life of it and realised that you had quite a lot of kids who didn't want to be there. So that's really, my favourite thing is the after-school courses where you get to meet the kids, be with the kids, and they all want to be there. And the other thing I do is develop learning and support resources. So while I do those things, because a lot of it is online, I get to do all the other things that I like to do, like look after grandkids. When they go to sleep, I do a bit of work. I travel a lot, and as long as I can take my laptop and have internet access, I can keep teaching. So even while I'm here at the conference, I've got my classes running in the background and I'm corresponding with the kids. So it's really a dream life now. I'm quite enjoying it. So one of the main focuses of this talk is Gifted Online, which is a Tasmanian Department of Education initiative. And it's a whole bunch of online courses, so my coding courses are just one section of it. It's organised and funded by the Department of Education. So the Department of Education employs a certain number of teachers, and they're given time release from their regular classes. So most of those teachers are based in school, but there are a few of us who are semi-retired or mostly retired who do it from home. The classroom teachers in the schools actually nominate the students who will participate. So schools around the state, when they hear about the courses, if they've got a student that they believe to be gifted or needing extension, they actually sign them up for the courses. And the students in their schools have a support person. So usually they're given a certain time per week where their gifted online course or courses run. Schools do it quite differently. Some will do it on the side of their regular classroom, so they may have a couple of computers there and they'll send a student to do their gifted online work while the rest of the class are doing something else. Other schools actually run a class where they might take a whole bunch of kids to the library and there'll be a support person there, and those kids may be doing quite a range of different gifted online courses. So the actual courses, there's coding of mine, but there's art, there's philosophy, there's all sorts of things. So that can be quite a mixed class. But all that's required their end is that there's a support person. They don't have to know anything about coding. They have to be just that contact point for the kids and communication for me. Operates asynchronously, so it's not live. generally. I can organise a live session with a particular school if I want, but all the schools will be online at different times. So it seems to work fairly well asynchronously. The coding courses that I'm running are sort of increasing in demand, and a lot of that is because, of course, the Australian curriculum is now mandating coding for kids in grades K to 8, and very few teachers, particularly in the primary area, feel competent to teach it. So one of the things about the Gifted Online, even though all the kids in the class are not doing it, what we're getting is a bit of an into that classroom where you're getting some students learning to code, the teachers looking over their shoulder. Through it, we're actually getting some of the teachers then learning themselves, and so it's expanding that way via the kids, really. Another reason it's needed is that highly gifted kids are bored out of their mind in particularly those upper primary years. You know, grade 5 and 6, they are just not getting what they need, and a lot of them are quite problematic in classrooms. They're not necessarily even appearing to their classroom teacher as being particularly gifted. It's one of the things we see is that, you know, often, and it's often boys who are quite, you know, challenging in the classroom because they're bored. The teacher doesn't really think that they're gifted, but once they get into some of these courses, they actually can show their colours. And the other reason for wanting these courses is about equity. You've all seen, you probably experienced of the kid who've got mum or dad is a programmer. They've been doing it since, you know, before they were 2 years old, and, you know, they're really familiar. Versus the kid in perhaps the little mining town in Tassie who's, you know, maybe doesn't even have a computer, parents aren't interested, they have had no exposure to that. And so it's really important that as an education community we find ways to actually get a bit of equity in that situation between the kids who have that digital capital at home and in their community versus the kids who don't. So history of my courses, these are my Gifted Online courses, have been running for a lot of years. So I started back in 1998 using an environment called Click and Play. And back then things were pretty challenging internet-wise in the schools. You know, if the kids got online, you know, that was just amazing. If they managed to, you know, dial up on the modem and make some stuff happen, it was really good. And needless to say, back then, you know, you might go through a whole year of a course and probably not make the progress that you would like. In 2007, I was very glad to see Scratch come around because that was a great step up from Click and Play. And when we moved actually later on to the online version of Scratch, that was so much better because you didn't have to worry about software install and things like that. One of the things that concerned me in my Gifted Online classes, though, was that they were dominated by boys. And that was because the classroom teachers enrol the kids. And they'd be saying, you think of your typical grade 6 teacher, oh, look, there's this online course in game making for my class, who will I put in? Oh, Johnny over there, he loves computers, let's put him in. They weren't thinking about Millie, who may be way more suited to the course than Johnny, because Johnny's the one who's really problematic. You know, he's making a lot of noise, he's kicking up, whereas Millie's sitting there quietly doing what the teacher says. She's probably equally bored, but it's demonstrated in different ways. So I was getting classes full of boys, and that really concerned me. So I actually set up a new course called Codex, and I said, right, this is a course only for girls. If you want to enrol someone in it, you have to enrol girls. So by doing that, I actually forced some gender balance across my coding courses. Codex, though I ran differently, I was using Alice for that, which is block-based Java-y type environment, and I found that that really appeals to the girls because it's animation and storytelling and that sort of thing. 2015, I moved to Python for two reasons. One was that Scratch I no longer considered should be gifted extension because really that had moved to the stage where everyone should be teaching that as mainstream curriculum in classes. And I wanted to move to Python, but it was difficult to teach it online until I tripped over Grok Learning, which was the answer to all my worries. So I'll just show you a little bit about the courses. So yeah, Codex, girls only, block-based Java, 3D animations. My Python courses now, I have 2 courses. So I started out with Python for whip snakes, so I was sort of trying to get a bit of a hook for the kids. I do actually point out in the first introductory stuff that actually Python isn't anything to do with snakes, but it's a bit of a play on words for them, they enjoy that. One of the things I found this year was that lots of the teachers got excited and they were enrolling kids for Python for whip snakes, which was text-based Python coding, but the kids had no coding background and they were quite swamped, some of them. So I introduced a new course on the fly very quickly, which was Python Jumpstart, and I'm using the Grok Blockly environment for that. And that's actually really encouraged the kids who were struggling with the whip snakes one. They've gone to that one, they're much happier. So one of the keys to the success of my online courses is using gamification. So, I mean, there's all sorts of different, I guess, models for gamification within teaching, but fundamentally it's application of game mechanics and thinking to a non-game situation. So at a pretty basic level in my online courses, the first thing I have is scoreboards, levels, badges. So the students all work at their own pace through the courses, and that's particularly important in the online environment. It divides the course into achievable chunks for them, and it provides short-term goals. One of the things I have at the end of each level is a game boss. And game bosses rethink testing and failure. So with a game boss, students expect to fail the first time. It's a pretty cruddy game boss if you can just beat it the first time you try. You expect to have to work to beat a boss. You expect to learn from your failure when you have a boss. So you try a level, you get to the boss, doesn't work, you work out what didn't work and you refine that and reiterate to get there. When you finally beat that boss, you have a real feeling of achievement. And it ensures that mastery is achieved. So if you've got that level boss and you've got a set standard that a student has to get to beat the boss, you know they have achieved mastery. And they have done it by repeatedly improving and reinforcing. Compare that with a school test. When you have a test, you hope or maybe expect to pass the first time. If you don't, well, too bad. You certainly don't expect to have to keep trying to pass, definitely at a high school level. It's, oh, well, I failed it, put it in the drawer, forget about it. And if you're not successful, well, that was no good, and mastery may or may not be achieved. You think about maths tests, they'll do a unit, they do a test, oh, failed that, let's move on to the next unit, and they may not have achieved mastery. So I think that's one of the really valuable things that you can bring in. Something else I have in my courses are health bars. So if kids aren't signing in each week, they'll lose health. If they're not engaging the course, they'll lose health, and they get their health back by submitting work. And that, of course, promotes engagement. It's amazing how much the kids care about their health bar dropping. I sort of scratch my head and think, well, really? But it gives me very quick feedback, and their teachers very quick feedback as to how they're going. You just look down, you can see the health bars. So Grok, of course, being browser-based was fantastic because I've got kids in these little primary schools who may see a technician once a month. Getting software installed is just, almost impossible in some of them. It's got all the notes there, it's got problems to solve, immediate feedback. Lots and lots of choice of different courses. So all my kids have a subscription, so we've got access to all the Grok courses. Each of the Grok courses is nicely divided into modules, and each module's got notes and problems to solve. You've got your student dashboard. I mean, a lot of you have probably seen this. This is really valuable for me because I can see straight away who's signed in and who hasn't, how they're going and all those sorts of things. You can set up your own groups within that, and you can assign Grok courses to individual students. So I find that really helpful because my more advanced students, I can assign the more advanced courses, and the other students you can give other ones. So when you look for a student, so this is, say, a particular student that I've assigned these courses to, you get a really nice visual dashboard showing what that student's completed and how they're going. We've had a look, I think, before at a couple of the other speakers at the auto marking and the instant feedback that kids get. That's really vital in my situation being online, because if they had to email me a piece of code and wait till I look at it and work out whether it works and send it back, that just wouldn't work for their learning. But with the Grok, straight away they can see how their code is going. So the way I set up my courses is that I pull separate modules out of the Grok courses. One of the things I found was that a lot of the Grok courses, like the Intro to Programming, went really a little bit too fast for the primary kids. They weren't getting enough reinforcement and practice of each of the concepts as they were introduced, because they're designed for older kids and adults. So one of the things I've done is pulled modules from a whole lot of Grok courses, because there's a lot of overlap. Most of them will start at the beginning, and they'll tackle loops and things in their order. So I'm pulling, say, I think, well, we're going to focus on while loops at this level. And so I'll pull all the Grok modules that have that section in it. So the kids are then working through, I suppose, my courses rather than the Grok courses, but it's using the different parts of the Grok things. So the other thing I do then within our learning management system is that I put up help pages and video tutorials that will help them with the problems. So particularly, I can see if a lot of kids are struggling with a particular section, and that, a lot of the Grok notes, for those who've seen it, they're pretty well all text-based, and one of the frustrations of teachers is that the students won't read the notes. So I find I can make little video tutorials, especially early on, and then keep referring them back, read the notes. But, some students, well, a lot of them just won't. Interestingly, I've found girls will read them more than boys, and they'll tend to be more successful. So, I've sort of set mine up within our learning management system with that help for each of those things. So some of the challenges I'm finding with the course: getting more girls enrolled in Python. So they're enrolling them happily in Codex, still not getting many enrolled in Python. Last year we put a thing saying, okay, schools are allowed to enrol up to 5 kids, so we said you can enrol no more than 3 boys. If you want to put 3 girls, we'll let you have 6 kids in the course. We're still getting schools that aren't enrolling girls, so it's still a challenge. Getting the right students into the courses is still a bit of a challenge. So because the teachers are enrolling them, now when I say the right students, we want kids in these who are going to, I guess, have an aptitude for coding, and the teachers themselves are not necessarily very good yet at selecting those right students. So one of the things I'm hoping to do next year is I'm going to have a taster course, and we're going to let maybe 300, 400 kids have a go at the taster, and then we will pull perhaps 70 or 80 kids from that then who are successful on the taster, rather than having the way it is at the moment. They've enrolled a student, they've paid their subscription, and they're just not really connecting with it because it probably wasn't the right course for that student. Student resilience can be a problem, particularly when it gets challenging. Trying to get them to not give up and say this is just too hard. I'm sure that's some of my students who've had the 128 goes on the solving some of those Grok problems. There's some who will just keep going at it. I just about die when I look at a kid's dashboard and I see they've had 36 tries on one problem. For goodness sake, why didn't you email me before you got, that bad? But other kids will have one try and say, it's too hard, I can't do it, I don't do this anymore. So that's a challenge. The quality of the code produced by the kids, or sometimes the lack of quality. So sometimes I will look at some of their code that has passed the Grok test because, they've done all the things that it required, but it may be quite poorly coded, very inelegant. Getting them to go back and look at that to try to look at how they could have done it better is a challenge because the kids want to keep going forward. They don't want to look back at what they've done. And Grok has some really nice, shows of solutions or better solutions, but getting the kids to go back and look at those is a challenge. Communication, of course, is a chronic problem with online, and particularly talking primary schools because the kids are not necessarily, particularly when they start, the younger kids in my courses are grade 4s. They haven't had their school email accounts set up, some of them, and some of the teachers are better at communicating than others. So that's a chronic problem with online teaching. Sufficient access is also another challenge. They have an hour a week of class time allocated to it. I do not believe you can learn to code in an hour a week. An hour a week, they'll have their 1 hour one week, and sometimes that's only 50 minutes or 40 minutes because of other things that intruded. The next week maybe they were sick, then they get another week at it. The next week maybe there was a sports carnival in their time. So the kids who are really successful are the ones who really get captivated by it and they're going home doing it. The actual, within the classroom, I think it's going to be a challenge with digital technology as a curriculum area all the way through because, I don't believe you can learn to code when you're only doing an hour a week. So there has to be ways, that's where Grok is good because at least the kids have the opportunity to get on at home if they're interested. But we've got a lot of other kids that we also want to move ahead, and if they're not getting on at home, that's a problem. Successes. This is pretty much why I do it. For those who maybe can't read it from the back there. Okay, hi Mrs. Meijers, I love Python for Whipsnakes so much, it's pretty much the only day I look forward to going in the week, or look forward in the week. And you think, wow, that's sad, but it's a reality for lots of kids, particularly kids at that age in school. As far as the Python challenge, which is running now, I shouldn't be here, I should be there furiously answering messages from my kids. So last year, we had quite a lot of success with the kids, and for them, the challenge actually is a really important driver for them to be spending more than their hour a week. Because they say, I've got to get all these problems solved, and I say, well, listen, you're not going to get to do that in your normal go time. You're going to have to do it either at home or you're going to have to really hound your teacher to give you some extra time for that period. So, the kids are really excited about having that challenge, and, they build up to it, they get excited and they get nervous, and when they get it, or when they're working at it, they really work at it, and they're really proud of the achievements from it. So I think those sorts of things are really important in getting that little extra that you probably don't get in a regular classroom. So that's it from me at this stage. I'm open to emails if anyone wants to communicate with me about any of that. I guess questions.
Yep, any questions? And I'll bring the mic to you.
Thanks. I was interested in the idea of teachers not being able to pick up on students with an aptitude to coding. what would you suggest teachers specifically look for to give an indication that that's the right student? And with the taste tester, are you going to collect data to kind of identify those students, like what we should be looking for?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it's something that over time, we're going to work out. But at this stage, I'm saying to the teachers, strong mathematical ability. So if they're enjoying maths, they don't necessarily have to be, who knows, doing long multiplication or whatever they do in primary school maths. But they, I think, need to enjoy maths, and they need to enjoy solving problems. I think if kids don't like solving problems, they don't like thinking about problems. A lot of kids who perhaps do well at maths in primary school don't like to problem solve. They like to have a nice, neat, closed problem that has a right answer, and then they like to know there's one way to get that answer. So, and that's sort of pretty much how open I have it at this stage. With the taster, I'm just going to run through some of the first Grok modules, and if the kids engage with them, then they will probably go on and do well.
Thanks. Just a comment to follow up on that. I find the hour of code quite handy for students who haven't done any programming before, to put a class through that, and pretty quickly you can see the ones who are leaping into solving the problems, the ones who are getting them 100% correct as they go through. That's a pretty good sort out for a first pass, and you can do it in one lesson and any teacher can run it.
Yeah, and I think, one of the problems for me is because they're all different schools and you've got a lot of teachers who are not interested in doing any of that coding stuff, they'll happily drop a kid into a course because, there's a whole lot of reasons they drop them in too. One of it is to placate parents who may be saying, well, what are you doing to extend my gifted child? I've put them in a gifted online course, And so, if I sent out a thing to all the schools saying, can you run the hour of code with your class, I know what wouldn't happen. So, that's just a sad reality of, the way things are in, lots of schools. And in their defence, they're pretty busy and they're trying to cope with all sorts of curriculum changes, particularly primary school teachers have, the Australian curriculum across the board that they're trying to deal with. They're not just working on one subject area. So, realistically, digital tech curriculum, that's a long way down the road for them.
Any further questions?
I kind of had a question, or still wondering about the question on selecting the best students, I guess, for programming. And I don't know if it's the best, if choosing the kids who are good in mathematics the best thing to do. The true thing is that those who are really good in mathematics are very good at figuring out how to solve a problem. And it's good, those are the best students, I guess, when it comes to problem solving, when you are now having them as programmers. But I found that most of them are not always interested in programming. I was in a situation where I wanted my kids to be in a programming competition, but I had a very short period of time in which I could train them. I had a month, so I could not, I didn't know how to select them. So I gave them a quiz just to test how good they would be in solving the problems, okay? And those who are gifted in mathematics especially, they did well. So I selected them, so I gave them also a choice to say that those who didn't pass the test and who are really interested in programming and want to participate in the competition, they also have an option to come and start learning with the others. At the end of the day, I ended up with most of my learners were those who did not pass the test. Those who were really good in mathematics didn't continue because of the interest. Most of the kids I find that those who are really gifted, they are very much bookworms. They are very much book related, but in programming you need someone who's playful, I guess, or keen on trying new things and not being afraid to, you know. But those who are really good in mathematics, they want to know the facts and they want to follow this and that, you know. So at the end of the day, they are really good. They are what we need, but their interest is not there.
Yeah, I think that touches on a really important point, and I mean that is one of the problem, particularly with a lot of the gifted upper primary school boys who are not going to perform well on their classroom maths tests and things because they're bored out of their brain with it and they don't care about it, they're not interested. Whereas some of those boys may still do very well in the coding. So, yeah, getting the right kids, I think, is always going to be an ongoing challenge.
Okay, that's all we have time for. Thank you once again, Marg.
Thank you.